What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yugioh Deck of the Day. Today we're taking a look at a Cyberse deck because Firewall has finally come off the list with an errata. It's something that a lot of people will be waiting for because we knew that since it's a protagonist monster, it was eventually going to come off the list when Konami decided to give an effect that was actually not as broken as it used to be. So now that it's back, I think it's appropriate that we give it in the deck that it was supposed to be in, so we're taking a look at a Cyberse deck. Now, if you want to play this deck or any deck with Firewall at all, you're going to have to wait until the 14th of April because the change to Firewall coming from ban to a 3 does not take effect until that time. Otherwise, we would be able to play with its old effect, and that was not going to be a good thing for the format. So yeah, we're just giving you a deck list just to give you a heads up if you want to play a Cyberse deck, how you're going to play when the time comes, or if you have an idea of your own that Firewall is going to be good in, you just have to wait a little bit more until you play it. So before we begin, if you enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the monsters, we play of course 3 copies of Balancer Lord. By paying 1000 life, you get an extra normal summon. If this card is banished, you can special summon level 4 or lower monster from your hand. This is the normal summon that you want to be going for most of the time, and the monster that you want to be summoning with Balancer Lord's effect, or you want to be normal summoning if you do not have Balancer Lord, is one of the 3 copies of Lady Debug, because it gives you a surge for a level 3 or lower Cyberse monster. So these 2 are the main normal summons you have. You can basically normal summon any monster you want from the deck if you do not have any of these, but since you're playing Sign and Mining, you do have a lot of possibilities of getting to one of those. And the other monsters, if you actually summon them instead of using the monsters from the hand as link material, because you know the coders that can be used from the hand as link material, they actually get a little bit better effects sometimes if you use them from the field. So it's not bad sometimes skipping a normal summon to summon one of those instead, because you might get an extra effect. 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. You're mainly using Parallel Exceed for link material, but I do play 1 Xyz monster in the deck, and I do think that this Xyz monster, before Firewall was released on the ban list, it wasn't the best monster to play in a Cyberse deck because of its effect. Yes, we did have Access Code Talker, but I think the Link 4 that you really need to be going for is Firewall Dragon, because Access Code, if it's not Link Summon, it's not going to power up. Yes, it can blow up cards, but still I think Firewall is a much better card because it gives you a disruption and gives you more monsters from your hand. Now for the monsters that can be used as link material from the hand, first off we have 3 copies of Microcoder. So like I said before, these get effect depending on how they're used as link material. If you use them from the hand, they get different effects from not using them from the field. But 90% of the time you're going to be link summoning these from your hand. So if this is linked for a code talker from your hand, you can add a Sign, a Spell, and Trap from your deck to your hand, or if it was on the field, you add a level 4 Cyberse monster instead. Usually you're going to be searching for a Sign, a Spell, and Trap, and you do play a lot of them, so it's not like you're always going to be searching for your Signet codec. You're going to be searching for other stuff if you already have that card, or if you really want to, or if you did not draw a normal summon like for Balancer Lord or for your debug, you can normal summon this and search one of your monsters like your Parallel Exceed. 3 copies of Code Generator, same thing. If it's used for a code talker for a link summon, if it's used from the hand, you send a Cyberse monster with 1200 attack or less from your deck to your hand, or if it was on the field, you add the target to your hand instead. So this usually is going to send your Dotscaper from the deck to the grave to get another monster on the field, and it's another monster that you won't be using from the hand most of the time. 2 copies of Code Radiator. This card's effect is actually not that good. It's just another monster that you use from the hand as link material. This is why I don't think you need to max it out, but it's still another monster you search with your code deck and another monster you use for link material because it has a different attribute. So what it does is if it's used as link material for a code talker, you make a monster your opponent controls attack to 0 and you negate its effects. If it was used from material on the field, you target 2 monsters instead of 1. So not the best effect. It can come up sometimes going second. It's something at least, but not something that you really want to resolve like the other 2. For the one of Cyber Monsters, play 1 copy of Dotscaper, of course, because you set this with your code generator to the grave and you get an extra monster on the field, and when it's banished you will get it again. 1 copy of Backup Secretary, just an extender, and it being level 3 is actually important because I do play the Synchro package in the deck, so you need to play a level 3 monster in order to be able to double its attack, to double its level, so you can go for Cyberse Quantum Dragon. 1 copy of Infoflyer, another extender. 1 copy of Clock Wyvern. You need to play 1 Clock Wyvern if you want to go for Cyberse Clock Dragon, and I do play both all Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz power of the deck, so I really want to be able to include all of them just to make the deck more iconic. Maybe if you're not a fan of any of these, you can cut them from your deck, that's perfectly fine, but I still like playing all of them. 1 copy of Cyberse Synchron, of course, and I also play 1 Cyberse Magician because I also play the Ritual package, and Cyberse Magician is a good card. If you combo this with a Wicked and a Cyberse Quantum Dragon, which is probably the minimum the deck can do right now, but even just that can be really problematic. So if your opponent does not have a Dark Ruler no more, maybe some like a Droplet, they're not going to be able to deal with it very easily. So this is why this is a good old combo that Cyberse used to do when it first came out, because it didn't have a lot of power back then without cards like your Microcoder and your Code Generator. So it used to do that play. Now it can do a lot more, but still still, if your hand is very awkward and you cannot do much, this is a play you can do that can absolutely win the game against some decks. The only hand drop plays 3 copies of Ash Blossom. You cannot really afford to play too many hand drops in a deck like this because you need a lot of cards to function. It's not like one debug is going to get you a full combo. You need a lot of cards in your hand. So the more hand drops you have, the less chances you have opening the cards you need in order to go off. So this is why you can cut the hand drops completely if you want. But I think if you want to play hand drops, just relying on Ash is perfectly fine because it's the most generic hand drop. She's never going to be dead no matter what you're facing. For the spells, play 3 copies of Silent Codec, the card that makes this deck work. So every time you link summon a Code Talker, you're going to add a Cyberse monster with the same attribute from your deck to your hand, and then you can only search one attribute per turn, so it's not like you can search the same attribute multiple times. So this card gives you infinite searches when you go for your talkers, because every time you use one of your microcoder or maybe your code generator, you're going to be searching for another attribute, because the code talkers have different attributes, so you summon the one you need, and the more monsters you get to your hand, the more monsters you can get to the field because you link someone from the hand eventually. So this is why this deck can actually use maybe the extra link, can go for a lot of OTK potential. With Firewall now you can go for a 3-card bounce during your opponent's turn, which is something the deck really needed because the talkers don't really have disruption on their own. They only have OTK potential with a lot of attack power and with access code, but Firewall Dragon is the monster that you want to be summoning when you're going first, possibly giving it calling with 2 or 3 link arrows so you can bounce multiple cards during your opponent's turn, and if your opponent doesn't have enough cards for you to bounce, you can also bounce cards from your graveyard back to your own hand for follow-up. 3 copies of Silent Mining. Usually you're going to be searching for either your Balancer Lord or your Lady Debug, depending on the one you don't have, because you usually want to get them both on the field. But if you have both on the field and you can search for a microcoder or generator, it's perfectly fine. 1 copy to Silent Optimization. Optimization is the extra normal summon card. You just play 1 because you're going to search this if you already have your codec and you don't really need your Silent Mining because you already have enough monsters for hand. But sometimes you need extra normal summons. Maybe you can use one of the little ones, extra effects by extra normal summoning them, or you can extra normal summon your Clock Wyvern, which will give you another monster. It's a good card to have at 1 of. 1 copy of Silent Ritual for your Cyberse Magician, and this gives you tokens as a follow-up by banishing from the grave. 1 copy of Silent Fusion to go for your Clock Dragon. For the generic spells, play 1 copy of Foolish Burial for your Dotscaper. 1 Monster Reborn. There are a lot of good cards you can bring back in the deck, not just the main deck monsters. Bring back Link monsters is very, very important. Sometimes bring back an Access Code Talker to pop more cards, or a Firewall Dragon to bounce. It's gonna be really good. And 1 copy of Call by the Grave to make sure that some effects go off, because sometimes if your opponent cuts you with an ass during your search for your Silent Codec, then you're not going to be able to. And the only trap I play in the deck is 2 copies of Silent Conflict. This is the Infernity barrier of the deck that you can use if you control a Code Talker monster. It banishes the card and negates, and the most important part is that your opponent cannot activate cards with the same original name as that card for the rest of this turn. So even if their opponent activated a card that says that the activation can only be activated once per turn, so if you negate the activation you can activate another card, not with this counter trap. With this counter trap, even if that's the case, your opponent will not be able to activate the same card again, even if they have same copy. For example, maybe like a Desires, if they want to activate a second one, they will not be able to, even though the card says that if the activation was negated, you can activate it again. With Conflict, they will not be able to activate the same card again. For the extra deck, we have the fresh off the ban list Firewall Dragon. Now keep in mind, this card has the errata. Like I said, if you want to play a deck with Firewall, you're going to have to wait until the mid of April. So the errata is that you can only special summon once per turn from your hand, which is perfectly fine. This is what the deck actually needed in order to be able to work. So the errata doesn't really hurt a deck like this, because even if you were playing Firewall before the errata, you're not going to spam a lot of monsters from your hand. The Firewall spam was problematic in FTKs and stuff like that, but not in Cyberse. In Cyberse, the deck actually used Firewall more like a disruption and to get at least 1 monster out of your hand. Sometimes maybe you could get 2 monsters out of your hand, but being able to summon just 1 is perfectly fine. The main issue is that you did not have a lot of disruption. The only disruption you had was cards with Silent Conflict, but now you have a bounce, which is very, very huge. And if you're trying to OTK or get a more advantage, you can bounce your own cards from your grave as well, so it doesn't really matter if you're going first or second. You can do a lot of stuff with Firewall Dragon. For the talkers, play 1 copy of Code Talker, because you need a link to Code Talker in order to be able to go for one of your coders from your hand in case you don't have a lot of monsters on the field. 1 Transcode Talker to bring more monsters from the grave. 1 Xcode Talker. Xcode Talker, you're mainly using it for its arrows, because it does have these arrows that are weird, but you actually need them in order to be able to get more monsters on the field and go for an extra link. But it does have an effect that locks your opponent's monster zones. Against some decks, that can actually be very huge. If you're playing against a very heavy combo deck that they need a lot of monster zones in order to be able to work, they will be forced to awkwardly link summon in order to clear space in order to summon more monsters, so this is why it's got really good. 1 copy of Power Code Talker, 1 copy of Shooting Code Talker. Shooting Code Talker can actually give you some case because it can attack multiple times, so if you can get an actually good setup for this card, you can do a lot of damage. And of course, the infamous Access Code Talker that everyone is playing. Access Code Talker in this deck is very, very good because you have a way to bring it back from the grave, so even if you do not manage to OTK the first time you summon this, you can bring it back from the grave. Yes, it's not going to get the attack boost, but you can still banish monster from the grave to pop your opponent's card, so it's very huge. For the Link Monster Enablers, we play 1 copy of Cyberse Witch. Cyberse Witch is the one that searches your Cyberse Magician and your Cyberse Ritual spell. You also Can target level 4 lower Cyberse monster you grave, special summon it if you activate this effect to search, so she's a really good card. One copy of Clock Spartoy. Clock Spartoy is the one that searches you use Silent Fusion. One copy of Cyberse Wicked. Wicked is the one that searches you use Cyberse Synchron to go for your Quantum Dragon, and it has the protection effect, so if you finish your turn with a Cyberse Wicked, a Cyberse Quantum Dragon, and a Cyberse Magician under these materials, that's a very hard board to deal with. One copy of Clock Lizard. Clock Lizard is a card that gives you recovery, because sometimes you can have trouble dealing with a lot of decks, because when you try to OTK, if your opponent plays something like a Netherlands and they keep their stuff until they know that you're going to struggle to come back when they destroy maybe your Cyberse Clock Dragon or something like that, with Clock Lizard you can have recovery because you can put back your Clock Dragon to the extra deck and then fusion summon it by banishing the materials from the grave, so this is a really card to give you a second chance. One copy of Splash Mage to bring back another mask from the grave to get more material in the field, and 3 boss monsters. Play one, of course, one copy of Cyberse Clock Dragon. Cyberse Clock Dragon is the one that you go for when you go for huge attack and go for OTK. One copy of Cyberse Quantum Dragon. Cyberse Quantum Dragon deals with problems, it can attack twice and can bounce monsters like a Grand Mole to your opponent's hand. And one copy of Firewall Exceed Dragon, which is a monster that I didn't really use before in Cyberse. Yes, you could bring back access code, but it says link 4, this is why it wasn't really that optimal. But the problem is that with access code, you didn't really have a lot of attack points, and sometimes you would bring this back in order to get some more interruption during your opponent's turn by special summoning a Firewall back, but without Firewall that wasn't possible. But now Firewall is back, so you will be able to pounce your opponent's cards during your opponent's turn, so this is why I think playing this card is actually really important. And it's very easy to summon because you do play cards like Parallel Exceed. Yes, most of the time you're going to be using Exceed for link summon, but if you want to summon Firewall Exceed Dragon, it's very easy to do so in the deck. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Cyberse is a really fun deck, and now that Firewall is back, its main monster is back, you can actually play it again at its full power. So if you're a fan of Reigns, if you're a fan of Yusaku, a Playmaker, then this deck's for you. You can make it tweaks if you want. There are many versions. There are many monsters you can play in the deck as extenders. You can change the deck however you want, but the main idea is always the same. You're going to be link summoning a lot of tokens from your hand, and then now you can actually summon Firewall Dragon, bring back with Exceed. You can use Fusion, Synchro, or Exceed, whichever you want. So yep, a really fun deck, a lot of